Shalom everyone, and thank you for joining me in learning together Parashat Vayetchanan. In this parsha, there are so many different topics and subjects that we could choose to talk and discuss. But today I would like to talk about leadership and about picking a leader that can lead. And what do I mean by that? Moshe describes his petition, Vayetchanan el Hashem Beit Lemor. Moshe says to Hashem, Hashem, please, אתה חילת להראות את עבדך, את גודלך ואת ידך החזקה, אשר מיעל בשמיים ובארץ, אשר יעשיכם מעשיך וכי גבורתך. God, my God, says Moshe to Hashem, you already start showing me the greatness and conquering the other side of the Jordan River. And you are the awesome, greatest God. Please God, אעברה נא, ואראה את הארץ הטובה אשר בעבר הירדן, ההר הטוב הזה והלבנון. Please God, grant me permission to go into the land of Israel and to see this beautiful land. ויתעבר השם בי למענכם ולא שמע אליי, and Hashem refused to listen to me. ויאמר השם אליי רב לך, please Moshe stop. אל תוסף דבר אליי עוד בדבר הזה. Don't talk to me about this issue. This issue is closed. You cannot go into the land of Israel. עלה ראש הפסגה, you can go on the top of the mountain. שא עיניך, lift your eyes. Yama, Tzafona, Teimana, Mizracha, you can look at all different directions. Ur'e be'inecha, you can see with your eyes this beautiful land. Aval ki lo ta'avor et hayarden hazeh. But you will not be able to cross this Jordan River. So Moshe knows that's it. It's signed and sealed, which is one of the most painful stories. Moshe, who was the ultimate leader, who loved the Jewish people so much, who was willing to sacrifice his life for the Jewish people, who says to Hashem, if you don't forgive them, erase my name from the Torah. This leader wants one thing, to go into the land of Israel, and God says to him no. And then at the same time, Hashem says to Moshe, V'tzav et Yehoshua v'chazkeu v'amtzeu, and command Joshua and strengthen him, encourage him, because he is the one who will pass first, he will go first before this nation. And he is going to what? To inherit, or to give them as an inheritance, the land that they are about to cross to. Now, this pasuk, this verse, is a very interesting one. What does it mean, V'tzav et Yehoshua, and you command Yehoshua? Command him to do what? Joshua already knows that he is going to be the next leader after Moshe. Everyone knows. We already know it from Sefer Bamidbar, from the book of Numbers, that we read a few weeks ago. So what does it mean, V'tzav, and you shall command him? Second question that we have is, what does it mean, Ki hu ya'avor lifnei ha'am hazeh? La'avor is to, in a way, to transfer or to move. But what does it mean that Yehoshua will transfer, will move, will go further, will go forth? What exactly does it mean? And vehu yanchil otam et haaretz asher tireh, and he's going to inherit this land. He's going to conquer this land and give it as an inheritance for the Jewish people. So take a look at what Rashi says. Rashi says, V'tzav et Yehoshua. What does it mean that you shall command Yehoshua? Al hatrachot ועל המסעות ועל המריבות. Being a leader does not only mean that you enjoy the good life. Being a leader, you need to know you lead tough people. The Jewish people is not an easy nation to lead. They are opinionated, they are strong-willed, they are stubborn. They're going to give you troubles, they're going to challenge you. Yehoshua was somewhat concerned to be a leader. Why do I need it? Why do I need to be involved with politics and leadership? Says Hashem to Moshe, Tzav et Yehoshua, you shall command him, al hatrachot, on the troubles, al hamasaot, that he needs to carry them on his shoulders, v'al hamerivot, the queries, the disputes, the debates, the fights. A leader must know, before you go and assume responsibilities as leader, you need to know what you are getting yourself into. And you should not be afraid of it. You need to understand this is part of the job. V'chazkeu ve'amtzeu. What does it mean that you need to strengthen him and to encourage him? Bidvarecha, you need to talk to him. Moshe, and this is, by the way, just as a side note, this is a beautiful way of how to basically give the torch to the next generation. How a leader empower the second leader who is taking his position, who is being granted to go into the land of Israel that I, Moshe, cannot, and still to empower him so he knows and everyone knows that I would like him to succeed. This is an incredible attribute that Moshe, again, we spoke about Moshe last week in Sefer Dvarim, how great of a leader he was. Here we see again, he is one of the ultimate leaders that we have. שלא ירח ליבו, לומר כשם שנענש רבי עליהם, כך סופי להיענש עליהם. Meaning Hashem says to Moshe, tell Yoshua, don't be afraid. Because Yoshua was concerned. Look, Moshe Rabbeinu was punished. I, even more so. I'm not like Moshe. Obviously I will be punished by being a leader. מבטיחו אני כי הוא יעבור והוא ינחיל. Hashem says to Moshe, I promise Yoshua, he is going to be the leader that will lead the people into the land of Israel, and he will be the one to conquer the land of Israel. And now take a look. כי הוא יעבור, because he will transfer or will move or will bring the people on the other side of the river. What does it mean, כי הוא יעבור? That he will be the one to transfer and to transform and to move forward. אם יעבור לפניהם ינחלו, ואם לאו לא ינחלו. This statement basically is the modern statement of the commanders of the IDF. אחריי, after me. Hashem says to Moshe, tell Yoshua, if he goes and he leads the people, they will conquer the land. If he stays behind and he let other people do his job, and he doesn't show responsibility and leadership, they will not be successful. And he brings the proof. כן אתה מוצא כששלח מן העם אל העי והוא ישב, ויקום מהם אנשי העי. If you look at the book of Joshua, after the Jewish people conquered Jericho, the walls collapsed. Then there was another nation called the Ai, not a big nation. And Yeshua decided, you know what, why should I go with all the people to conquer the Ai? I will just send a few thousand people and we will just annihilate them. He sent them and they were defeated. And everyone was devastated. Look at the book of Joshua, the beginning of the book of Joshua. Everyone was devastated. Everyone was totally afraid, terrified. We won one war, we lost the other one, we are going to be destroyed. And then Yoshua fell on his face, he prayed to God, please God help me. And Hashem says to him, Kum lech, rise and go. קום לך כתיב, אתה הוא העומד במקומך ומשלח את בניי למלחמה, למה זה אתה נופל על פניך? לא כך אמרתי למשה רבך, אם אתה עובר עוברין ואם לאו אין עוברים. Hashem says to Joshua, after the defeat against the Ai, he says to him, what are you doing? What are you praying for? I told you, the ingredient for your success is very simple. Don't sit in your office and send the people. אתה עומד במקומך, you sit in your place, you sit in your office and you send my children to war? Hashem says to Yoshua, you need to understand, you need to lead. A leader does not sit in his office. He takes the people with him. They see that the leader fight, they fight with him. They see that the leader struggle, they struggle with him. They see that the leader show courage, they show courage with him. A leader of Israel, especially when they conquer the land of Israel, cannot sit at the back. He needs to lead. And that was the downfall of Yehoshua in the second war. And after that, no more. Read the book of Joshua. Joshua is always lead the people. So now we can see that the prerequisite for being a leader is to be a leader. In Hebrew, by the way, there is something beautiful here. The word leader in Hebrew is manhig, from the word nahag, a driver. Did you see a driver that sits in the back seat? And I'm not talking now about, the driveless cars. Talking about regular cars. The driver sits in the driver's seat, and he makes the decisions. For good, bad, he is the one who is responsible for all the passengers. If the driver will not drive, the car will not move. Yes, someone can push the car from the outside. So the car will move a bit, but not to its capacity. And also, you will have no control if there is no one who is holding the steering wheel. This is a true sense of a leader. A leader comes from the word manhig, nahag, driver. He is the one to drive the people. He's the one to be there for them in their difficult times. He's there to encourage them to be better people. He is there to show them that he takes responsibilities. This is a true leader. And Hashem says to Yehoshua, if you're not going to take leadership seriously, not only that you are going to fail, you're going to fail everyone else. Joshua immediately got the lesson. And from then on, he always led. He always was at the front, telling the other people, Acharai, after me. With that in mind, we just finished Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av, a day of fasting, really started from the night. And it's really about the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash, of the temples, the first and the second. Very sad day on our calendar. When we sat on the floor, we read Lamentations. And this year, we obviously also remembered October 7th as part of the destruction. But I want to talk about Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av that we just had a few days ago, and leadership. And what do I mean by that? There is a famous story in the Talmud, in the Babylonian Talmud, in Tractate Gittin, in page 55b. It says the following. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan says the following. What is the meaning of the verse in Proverbs, in Mishlei? Praiseworthy is a person who is always concerned. However, someone who is make his heart heavy will fall in a trap, or something bad will happen to him. So the Talmud says the following, one of their famous stories. Kamza and Bar of Yerushalayim. What's the story? So I'm skipping to the third line, and it says the following. Kamza and Bar of Yerushalayim. There were two people, Kamza and Bar Kamza, and because of them, Jerusalem was destroyed. What does that mean? So the Talmud says the following. There was a person who his friend's name was Kamza. Uval devave Bar Kamza. And his enemy was Bar Kamza. So you have a guy, I don't know his name, Mr. X. The guy that he really likes, his friend, his name was Kamza. And the guy he didn't like was Bar Kamza. Avat Seudata. So this person, Mr. X, made a meal. He prepared a celebration, a meal. Amar leshame. So he told his servant, Zilaiti li Kamza, bring Kamza to the meal. My friend, my best friend, bring him to the meal. Azal, so the servant, Aiti le Bar Kamza. So instead of bringing Kamza, his friend, he brought him Bar Kamza. Now, Bar in Aramaic is the son. So it might be even that this Mr. X was very friendly with the father, but was an enemy with the son. So whatever, don't shoot the messenger, but the messenger made a terrible mistake. Instead of inviting Kamza, who was Mr. X's friend, he brought his enemy. So you can imagine, Mr. X is walking around his festive meal, and then who does he see? Ata ashkeche dehaveyativ. So he saw that his enemy is there, Bar Kamza. Amar mich deu gavra bal devava deu gavra umay baitacha. kumpuk. So it's not that clear from the Talmud if that's Mr. X or someone else. Says to Bar Kamza, who was a known enemy to Mr. X. I hope you can all, follow along. There is Mr. X. This is the guy who makes the meal. He has a friend by the name of Kamza. He has an enemy by the name of Bar Kamza. He makes a meal. He sends his agent to bring Kamza, his friend. A mistake takes place. Bar Kamza, the enemy, sits at the table. He looks at him, Mr. X or someone else, and says to him, "What are you doing here? You are his enemy. Get out of here." This is a story that the Talmud describes that took place before the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash. You can imagine the embarrassment. This person, Bar Kamza, probably was also surprised that he was invited. Maybe he even thought that Mr. X, is trying to appease him. But now he's embarrassed in front of everyone. Someone is telling him, "Get out." אמר לו, "הואיל ואתה שיב כאן, והעיבנה לך דמי מה דאכינה ושתינה." Please, I'm here already. I know there was a mistake, but you know what? Just let me be. Let me sit by the table. I'll pay for my meal. אמר לו, he says to him, "No." אמר לי, "העיבנה לך דמי פלקה דסעודתך." I will give you half of the meal. Half of the price of the meal. That's pretty generous deal. אמר לו, he says to him, "No." אמר לי, "העיבנה לך דמי כולה סעודתך." You know what? I'll pay for all, for everything. Amar lo, says to him, "No." You understand the animosity between the two people. Nakta beyade ve'ukma ve'apke. Mr. X, or someone else, basically took Bar Kamza's hand and forcefully got him up and basically sent him out. Terrible. Even if I'll stop here, terrible story. Tremendous animosity and hate between people. And we can imagine that there are other people in the meal and no one says a word. Now take a look. Amar, so Bar Kamza says, "O'il vehavuyat verabanan velo machube, shma mina kanichaleu." This is a terrible sentence. He says, "I saw the rabbis were sitting in this meal. The rabbis were sitting there, and they saw everything that took place. None of them said anything. So what's the conclusion? They were happy with what was done to me. They supported it. They hate me too. Or they support Mr. X, who is probably a very wealthy person, making such a big meal. You know what? They loved what they saw. I have expectation. I don't have any expectation from anyone else, but the rabbis, the leaders of our community, the leaders of our nation sitting in that meal, and they don't say anything. Ezel ichul behu kurza bei malka. So you know what? If no one cares about me, I don't care about anyone else. Azal amar la lekeisar meradu bach Yehudai. Bar Kamza, I would assume, was also a very affluent person because he got a meeting with the Roman Caesar and he told the Roman Caesar, "The Jews are rebelling against you. I know." Amar le mi yeima. So the Roman Caesar looked at Bar Kamza and says to him, "Why do you think I will believe you? Because you said so? Maybe you just want to have a war and maybe you have your own agenda." Amar leshadar leu korbana, chaziti mekarvin le. Says to him, we can test it in a very simple way. Send them an animal that they will sacrifice on your behalf. And let's see if they do it. If they do it, so I'm a liar. If they don't do it, obviously they rebel against you. Azal shadar beyedei igla tilta. So the Roman Caesar gave him a very nice lamb, a sheep, to be sacrificed at the temple. Be'adi dekaati, shada במומה, בניב שפתיים ואמר לבדוקין שבעין. דוכתא דלדידן have מומה ולדידו לאו מומהו. So Bar Kamza takes this little lamb and on his way to Jerusalem, he makes a little blemish in that lamb, on the lips or something in his eye. Now we know that when we bring sacrifices to the temple, it should be without any blemishes. And this little blemish that he did is something that for us, for Jews, it's unacceptable. We cannot bring it as a sacrifice. But for the Romans, when they brought sacrifices to their idols, they didn't care if there was a little blemish on the lips or something in the eye. So, Savu Rabbanan lekeruv mishum shlo malchut. So Bar Kamza comes along, and he brings this little lamb to the temple, and he says to the rabbis, here is a lamb that the Roman Caesar sent. He asked me to ask you to sacrifice it. Now there is a problem. What's the problem? The problem is that this sacrifice cannot be sacrificed in the temple. Why? Because there is a blemish. I can't sacrifice it. However, I know that if I don't sacrifice it, the Roman Caesar will be very unhappy. He will be upset. He will interpret it as what? As that we rebel against him. And that's a death sentence to the Jewish people. What do I do? What do I do? What would you do? You are the leaders of Am Yisrael now. There is a junction. There is a responsibility on you at that junction to make a decision. What would you do? So Savu Rabbanan lekiruv mishum shlo malchut. So the rabbis suggested, you know what? Look, we need to make an exception. If we're not going to bring that sacrifice, the Roman Caesar would think that we rebelled against him and he will kill us. אמר לו רב זכריה בן אביקלוס, יאמרו בעלי מומין קרבין לגבי מזבח. So Rab Zchariah ben Avikalus, who according to some historians was perhaps the leader of the group that are called the bullies, the extremists, who wanted to push a war against the Romans. As you remember, in Jerusalem there were different groups. Some groups basically said we need to try to appease the Romans and somehow survive, and there was another group who basically disregarded what the rabbi said and said, no, we need to fight against the Romans. So according to some historians, Rab Zchariah ben Avikalus was their spiritual leader, but even if not, Rab Zchariah ben Avikalus basically says to the rabbis, what? How can you bring this sacrifice with a blemish? People would look at that and they will see that there is a blemish. And they will say, now we can bring sacrifices with blemishes. So we can't do it. Savu lemiktale, delo leizil velema. So the rabbi said, you know what? You might be right. So let's kill Bar Kamza. Because if not, he's going to go back to Roman Caesar and said, look, the Jews didn't bring the sacrifice. So obviously the Roman Caesar would say, they rebel against me, so I'll kill them. So let's kill Bar Kamza. Bar Kamza has a din, a status of what? Of a rodef, which means rodef is someone who chases after you. And this one, Bar Kamza, is basically endangering the entire Jewish people. If he will be alive to go back to the Roman Caesar and says, look, the Jews didn't bring the sacrifice, that's the end of us. אמר לו רב זכריה, יאמרו מטיל מום בקודשים יהרג. So Rab Zchariah ben Avikalus says to the rabbis, no, we can't do it. We can't kill Bar Kamza. You know why? Because people would say, if someone put a blemish in a sacrifice, he needs to be executed. And it's not true. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. So Rabbi Yochanan says, and that's years after the destruction of the temple. The destruction of the temple took place at 70 CE. And Rabbi Yochanan is around the 3rd century. אמר רבי יוחנן, ענוותנותו של רב זכריה בן אביקלוס החריבה את ביתנו, שרפה את היכלנו והגליתנו מארצנו. Rab Zchariah ben Avikalus' humility destroyed our temple, burned our sanctuary, and caused us to be expelled from our country. Now, this is a lot. This is a lot to blame one person. What did he do? Rab Zchariah ben Avikalus just suggested, look, we can't bring that sacrifice because it has a blemish. On the other hand, we cannot kill Bar Kamza because it's against the law, against the Jewish law. So why do you blame Rab Zchariah ben Avikalus? This is where leadership comes along. I would like to suggest to you that one of the most essential issues that we had at the time of the destruction was no leadership. This is the easiest thing to say no. No, don't bring the sacrifice because it has a blemish. Don't kill Bar Kamza because it's really against the law. But what yes? The easiest thing is to say no and to be negative and to say this is not going to work and this is not going to work. But suggest to me now, as a leader, what do you think can work? A. B. When Rab Zcharia ben Avikalus resisted the two options that the rabbi suggested, did he do it purely because he thought it's wrong or because he was afraid of the consequences? As a leader, when you make a decision, there will always be people who will be happy with the decision. There will be people who will be angry with the decision. There will be people that really will be totally indifferent to the decision. And there will be people who will be waiting on the fence to see if the decision was a success or not. And if it's a success, they will support it. And if it was a failure, they will be against you. Welcome to leadership. If you don't have it, don't be in that position. That's the problem of Rab Zcharia ben Avikalus. That's what Rabbi Yochanan basically says. Yes, the temple was destroyed because of sinat chinam, self-hatred, and hating other Jews, and not giving enough tzedakah, and not learning enough Torah, and not being nice, and all of the reasons that everyone tries to attempt. But Rabbi Yochanan wanted to focus on something very important, essential. Without that, there is no remedy. Without that, there is no future. Leadership, leaders. There is a junction in Jewish history. Do you bring this sacrifice, knowing that some people will say, we can bring sacrifices with blemishes? Or you kill Bar Kamza in order to basically get rid of a threat that's endangering the entire Jewish people? Both of those options are not great. But if there is no third option, then you need to make a decision. Not making a decision will be made for you, and it's not necessarily for your own benefit and for your own good. You remember what Moshe says to Yoshua? Ki hu ya'avor. If you lead, they will be successful. If you don't lead, if you try to hide, they are not going to be successful. So that's the understanding of this Babylonian Talmud, Gittin Nun Hey, and that paragraph. However, the Tanaim, the rabbis, after the destruction, especially Rabbi Yehoshua, that we're going to read about him in a minute, they understood that they need to lead, that they need to be with the people. Imagine, after the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash at 70, and after the total destruction that was there in around 135, after the rebellions of Bar Kokhba, that was a total destruction for the land of Israel and for its people. So the mood was sadness and hopelessness. So the Talmud in Baba Batra, page 60b, describes the mood and the environment after the destruction of the temple. Tanu Rabbanan, our rabbis taught us, כשחרב הבית בשנייה, when the second temple was destroyed, רבו פרושין בישראל שלא לאכול בשר ושלא לשתות יין. Many Jews decided they're going to deprive themselves from eating meat and drinking wine. נטפל להן רבי יהושע. This is a wonderful expression. Rabbi Yehoshua basically attached himself to the people. Rabbi Yehoshua, who was a Tana, was a Talmid, a student of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, and later on was one of the leaders of the Jewish people, he saw his people are sad, they are hopeless, they are devastated. The center of religion was destroyed, the house of God was destroyed. He understands that they need him. He leaves his Beit Midrash, he leaves his study hall, and he goes to the people. Amar lahem banai, look at the words, my children. מפני מה אי אתם אוכלים בשר ואין אתם שותים מים? My children, why don't you eat meat and why don't you drink wine? אמרו לו, so they told him, נאכל בשר שממנו מקריבים על גבי המזבח ועכשיו בטל? נשתה יין שמנסחים על גבי המזבח ועכשיו בטל? How can we eat meat, Rabbi? Are you out of your mind? The meat reminds us of the korbanot, the sacrifices that we used to bring to the temple, and now look at the temple, it's destroyed. Wine reminds us of the wine libation that we will pour on the mizbeach, on the altar. How can we drink wine? We have nothing, we have no future, we have no life. אמר להם. So Rabbi Yehoshua listened to them, and he told them, אם כן לחם לא נאכל שכבר בטלו מנחות. So maybe we shouldn't eat bread, because bread was part of the offering that was brought into the Beit Mikdash, to the temple, so maybe we shouldn't eat bread. אפשר בפירות, so they told him, yeah, maybe we shouldn't eat bread, we should eat fruits. So he says to them, Rabbi Yehoshua says, פירות לא נאכל שכבר בטלו ביקורים, don't eat fruits. Because fruits can remind you of what? Of the first fruits, the mitzvah, to bring the first fruits to the temple, so we shouldn't eat fruits. So they told him, אפשר בפירות אחרים. So maybe we should not eat the fruits that were brought to the temple, we should eat oranges. מים לא נשתה, שכבר בטל ניסוך המים. So he says to them, you know what, you shouldn't drink water either, because there was a water libation, especially during Sukkot time, and now we don't have the Beit HaMikdash, so we shouldn't drink water either. Shatku. So they were quiet. Now, if we would stop the story here, basically, Rabbi Yehoshua could tell them, so stop being people like that. Stop being someone who does not think. You obviously understand that you need to eat meat, and you need to drink wine, and you need to drink water, and you need to eat fruits. מה לעשות? What can you do? The Beit HaMikdash is destroyed, גמרנו. That's it. But that's not the end of the story. The story continues. They are quiet, which means Rabbi Yehoshua won the argument. But Rabbi Yehoshua understands something. He understands that he needs to offer them something that they can show their sadness due to the destruction of the temple, but at the same time to live life. So how do you find the balance? Says Rabbi Yehoshua, and this is a leader. אמר להם בניי, my children, בואו ואומר לכם, come closer to me. Don't stay distance from me. I'm not your enemy. I'm your leader. I'm with you. Come closer. שלא להתאבל כל עיקר אי אפשר. שכבר נגזרה גזרה. To tell you not to mourn at all for the destruction of the temple, obviously I'm not going to tell you. There is a gzera, we need to mourn. That's what we did a few days ago, Tisha B'Av, every year. Which, by the way, says a lot about us as people. There is a very famous story with Napoleon. I'm just digressing for a second. Who basically once made a decree that no one should have any lights in their homes one night. It was the night of Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av. And the Jews, obviously, put some lights, some candles, in order to be able to read Lamentations. And Napoleon heard about it, and he called the Jewish leadership to his palace. Says to them, what are you doing? I told you no lights, no candles. Why do you have candles? And they told him, look, this is a night that we mourn for a destruction of a very special, precious home that we used to have, and we cry on it. And Napoleon says, when was it? A year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago? So they told him back then, it was, 1700 years ago. And he looked at them and he says, a nation that treasures their past will have a future. We need to remember the past in order to get the lessons from it and to know where we came from. So the idea is, says Rabbi Yehoshua, כבר נגזרה גזרה. We need to remember the destruction of the temple. להתאבל יותר מדי אי אפשר, שאין גוזרים גזרה על הציבור, אלא אם כן רוב הציבור יכולים לעמוד בה. But to mourn over mourn, meaning to mourn and to be always sad and a constant state of sadness and despair, you can't do that. No one can do that. You want to tell me that Am Yisrael can not eat meat, not drink wine, not drink water? אלא כך אמרו חכמים, but rather, this is the way to go. סד האדם את ביתו בסיד, ומשייר בו דבר מועט. You paint your house and you leave one piece unpainted. וכמה? אמה על אמה. אמה is 50 centimeters, 50 centimeters on 50 centimeters. אמר רב חיסדא כנגד הפתח, and you put it not in a private place, but in front of the door. עושה אדם כל צורכי סעודה ומשייר דבר מועט. מהי? אמר רב פאפא קסא דארסנא. עושה אישה כל תכשיטיה ומשיירת דבר מועט. מהי? אמר רבא בצידה, שנאמר אם אשכחך ירושלים תשכח ימיני תדבק לשוני לחיקי. Basically, Rabbi Yeshua says, you know what we need to do? Everything we do, we need to have a small, little reminder of the destruction of the temple. You built a beautiful home, wonderful. But next to the door, have an unpainted, leave an unpainted place. You buy jewelry, one type of jewelry you don't have. You have a chuppah, you have a wedding, what do? You break a plate, you break a glass. And you say, Eshkachech Yerushalayim tishkach yemini, if I'll forget you, O Jerusalem, I'll forget my right hand. And we know, we all went to weddings. In the middle of the celebration, of the festivity, of the happiness, the joy, we break a glass and we recite this sentence that reminds us that our happiness is not yet full. It's not yet complete. This is the idea of what Rabbi Yeshua is suggesting. And see the contrast between the stories. Rab Zcharia ben Avikalu says no, but never offered, never suggested anything else. He just left it like that. And then it was decided for us. If you are a leader, you don't let that thing happen. No one will decide for you. You will make the decision. And here what Rabbi Yeshua is doing is incredible understanding of the people. First and foremost, he goes to them. He approached them as Banai, my children. And then later on, after he wins the argument, he says to them, Bo ve'omar lachem, come closer. I'm with you, I'm not your enemy. We are going to find a way to balance between these two conflicting powers. That on one hand, I'm sad, I'm devastated, I'm terrified of what will be my future. The temple is destroyed. God left me. My life are gone. And the other power, which is, we live our lives. The power of life is irresistible. So how do you intertwine them both? So you don't lose sight of the sadness that we have, but at the same time you can live life and enjoy life. So Rabbi Yeshua suggested a formula. This is a leader that understands the times, the circumstances, and his people. And he also has a vision for the future. A vision for a future of people who are going to be exiled and will never forget Jerusalem, but will be able to build lives. People all over the Jewish history. And you see it in art. The idea of Im eshkachech Yerushalayim, if I'll forget you, O Jerusalem, I'll forget my right hand, as an art piece, is through Jewish history. People remember Jerusalem in Shmona Esrei, in the silent prayer, davening, Yerushalayim ircha berachamim tashuv, that God, please go back to Yerushalayim. And that started from Rabbi Yeshua, immediately after the destruction of the temple. This is a leader with a vision, with compassion, with understanding. So now, V'tzav et Yehoshua v'chazkeu ve'amtzeu. Hashem says to Moshe, take Yehoshua, commend him. Being a leader is a tough position. It's something that it's not easy at all. You need to be worthy to be in that position. V'chazkeu ve'amtzeu, encourage him, empower him, strengthen him. He is the leader. Ki hu ya'avor lifnei ha'am hazeh, tell him. Leadership means you are always the first. You need to be the nahag, you need to be the driver. It's all on you. You are this driver of this huge truck, and other trucks and other buses of Jewish generations are on your shoulder. on your shoulders. And you need to be the one to lead them. And if you're not, this enterprise will not be successful. But if you will be able to carry them on your shoulders, you will be able to listen to them, to understand them, to feel them, to approach them. So then, והוא ינחית את הארץ אשר תראה. You will be able to overcome all challenges and give this land to its rightful people. Thank you.